Okay. Well, then perhaps we should start, since I think it's just gone 2 o'clock and the time for starting is due. So just to say to everybody, to start off with, good afternoon, and just to introduce myself, my name is Diane Parker. I'm honoured to be moderating this panel discussion today. In my ordinary life, I'm the Deputy Director General for University Education in the Department of Higher Education and Training in South Africa. I'd like to welcome the panelists who are here, and as has been indicated, we're still expecting to join us, but we will bring them in and welcome them when they arrive. And then, you know, actually in terms of the registrations to this discussion, there were more than 600 participants if everybody were to log in. So we will see, you know, during the period how many do come in, but I believe there are already over 200 people in the discussion. So welcome everybody, and we really are hoping for an engaging conversation today. This webinar is taking place in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic, and really it's an initiative of the Departments of Higher Education and Training, Science and Innovation, in partnerships with the embassies of Finland, France, Germany, Ireland, Switzerland, and Sweden, and is part of the Team Europe framework. And really what this is about is providing a platform for cross-continental dialogues on higher education. So it's wonderful to be here. I think we're all excited about being involved in this discussion. And this is the very first webinar of this forum. And it aims at sharing the experiences on how universities are facing the challenges of coping with the pandemic, how they've considered issues linked to health and safety of staff and students, how they will manage issues such as physical distancing in integrating staff and students on campuses as the various lockdowns ease across the world, and how they've managed business continuity to ensure that teaching, learning, researching continues, and that our academic year is saved and students across all contexts and circumstances are supported to succeed. In our context in South Africa, all our institutions have been closed since around about the 18th of March for contact teaching. And it's only now they are in the process of reintegrating certain groups of students and staff back onto their campuses in line with regulations that have been published by our minister. There's of course been much activity that's been going on during the lockdown period, and universities have been very active in supporting various research aspects, product design and production, and another number of areas as well. So it's not that there's been no activity in our universities. In case, I think many people will say that during this period, they've been working extremely hard and having many Zoom meetings and webinars. In fact, some of us are feeling very exhausted from all this interaction, which we're not normally, you know, normally we're able to have a cup of coffee sometime and go in a car somewhere. So things are really very different and very strange for us all. Our universities have also been involved, and I'm sure across the world this has been the case, in what we've called multimodal remote teaching and learning, to try and support students at a distance during this time to ensure that academic activity continues and that they are supported to complete and succeed in their academic year. There's been many challenges, but I'm sure there have also been many innovative aspects that have been implemented across different institutions. And it'll be really interesting to hear the inputs of our South African colleagues on these issues, and also hear about the experiences from our international partners. Let's compare our experiences, learn from one another, and engage on these issues. I'd really like to thank everybody for being here, and for all the high-level panelists who are joining us today. We've asked each speaker to give short inputs around about 8 minutes. And this will allow us time to have a good discussion after the inputs from each speaker. So I'd like to, with that, introduce our first panelist. Our first panelist is Dr. Linda Meyer. Linda is the Director of Operations and Sector Support at University South Africa. University South Africa, for those who are not aware of it, is an institution that represents all the universities across the system, and its board is made up of all the vice-chancellors of all the universities. Linda has served in various capacities in the higher education sector and is a member of the Audit and Risk Management Committee of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. Linda also served as a member of the Magistrates Commission and held several other senior positions as executive management, including the head of Justice College, of the Justice College, Chief Director, Dean, and Commissioner. So with all of that legal background for us to have an interest in, Linda, if you consider what's been going on over the last while, what do you think are the main challenges that universities in South Africa have faced due to the various regulations and the lockdown during the pandemic? And what has been the role of USAF in assisting coordinate the measures that have been taken to tackle these challenges? I'll hand over to you, Linda.
Thank you, Dr. Parker. As the institution that represents the university, the public universities in South Africa, our governing structures are the vice-chancellors of the 26 public universities. We have served in a coordinating role and also been engaging with the regulators. You would know that we are both resilient and zoomed out. Dr. Parker, I think that we all know you very well by now, and we spent many, many hours with you during this time. I think before I speak about the nuances, I'll be very brief. It's just within context for us to understand that our entire public post-schooling education and training system consists of 2.5 million students and staff. So it's important for us within context to understand the vast landscape in which these challenges were posed. So we, within the academic year, found in dealing with these emergency remote challenges that 3 categories of universities really emerged during this time. So the South African higher education ecosystem mirrored a vast inequality of the South African society and the crisis and pervasive inequalities that were evident. So we saw that the 3 categories of universities that emerged were largely functional, those that were prepared for multimodal interventions, those that were semi-functional, and those that had very limited functionality in the implementation and the ability to then adapt to this new learning construct. COVID-19 has led to accelerated remote interventions, as we all know, and adapted learning pedagogies and delivering modalities, but we've also seen systemic inequalities and entrenchments that we have had to deal with as USAF in supporting the universities that are our members. So one of the biggest challenges has been conceptualizing the extended academic year for 2020 and the compressed academic year that is envisaged for 2021, and the very hard and soft challenges around policy framework and solutions that we needed to construct. So if we just look at, for example, the historically disadvantaged universities and the support that we've had to really provocate for and work towards has been around infrastructure challenges, limited financial resourcing, and also the limited exposure that academic staff within these institutions have had to multimodal teaching and learning. Many people think that online learning is a quick fix and you can just have a little Zoom call and this is a modality. It really impacts on the quality assurance of those programs, and those are the challenges that we had to support with. With the students, lack of electricity being removed from campus, not having food security, device security. Many students had left their textbooks on campus, and had no library access whatsoever. So they really, within the digital divide, were extremely challenged within this construct. For academic staff, their capacity challenges, many people might think that academic staff have extensive experience with multimodal learning, and this in fact is not the case. Some universities have had lecturers, contact learning universities have had lecturers such as WITS, for example, and UCT in the MOOC domain, and they have had some online learning programs. But this is not a quick fix overnight construct, and we've seen that the learning modality has really been emergency remote teaching and learning, adapting to the environment to try and harness whatever resources are available. And the quality assurance mechanisms and the preparedness around these, we've really had to engage with the regulators and with the department, Dr. Parker and her team, in finding modalities that we could then construct. The assessment challenges around infrastructure, continuous formative assessment constructs, and how high stakes summative assessment constructs would then be implemented. Access to learner management systems, the expensive construct around that, and then very importantly, the impact on research. We've also been dealing with mental health issues and how we support our institutions with graduations and the like. So I know that I don't have much time, so I just, in wrapping up, I just want to say that from our perspective, we have seen that the department has really demonstrated strong leadership, and DIET and USAF have embraced a high risk-based approach for the completion for the academic year. And we really are planning for the gradual reopening of universities. Many of our students have told us, notwithstanding them getting digital devices and data, they don't have electricity at home. They don't have an environment that is conducive to teaching and learning. So as the university system gradually reopens, our energy and focus has been towards this risk-based adjusted strategy to ensure that we support institutions and students with the reopening and the institutionalization to ensure that the system can proceed, because we have other compounding issues that we're very mindful of. We saw, for example, yesterday that our unemployment rate is sitting over 30%, and there's also the perpetual market and perceptual value of what these graduates within this construct and this time as they graduate will pose to the market, whether they'll meet the rigorous demands that are normally set. And really, this COVID-19 has triggered a radical financial economic uncertainty in institutions. And Professor Habib, I'm sure, will touch on those elements. But we must, going forward, ensure that we are prepared for the future. And there are many things that we need to do differently. We have sat with fees must fall and many other challenges, and this should have not been a new challenge for us to embrace. Has ever been a catalyst for us to start taking stock and making sure that we collaborate and bring greater social justice perspectives to the forefront. Thank you, Dr. Parker.
Thank you very much, Dr. May. I think that's been a very useful start to the discussion. Some of these things are very, very close to us in South Africa, and I'm not sure how relevant they are in other parts of the world. The aspect of not having access to electricity, for example. But surely the challenges that we're experiencing are really going to, I think, in some way or another, force us into quite radical changes in the way we think about higher education, the delivery of higher education in the future. I want to go on to our second panelist, and that is Dr. Thandi Mgwebi. Thandi is the Deputy Vice-Chancellor responsible for research and innovation and internationalization at Nelson Mandela University in South Africa. She was also the former Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research and Innovation at Tshwane University of Technology, and before that she held positions as the Director of Research and Professor at the University of Western Cape, and the Executive Director of the South African Research Chairs and Centre of Excellence at the NRF. She's been around the system in all kinds of ways, and she was a founding director of the Southern African Systems Analysis Centre and served as co-chairperson for the 2018 World Sustainability Forum that was held in Cape Town in 2018. Thandi holds a PhD in medical and cell and developmental biology from the University of Cape Town, as well as various other qualifications. So we are very interested, Thandi, to hear your input, and really from your perspective, if you think about Nelson Mandela University and perhaps also reflecting on your experience at Tshwane University of Technology, what do you see as the main challenges for your university, and how have you gone about trying to solve those during this COVID pandemic crisis?
Thank you very much, Di, and thank you very much, colleagues, for the kind introduction. So I'm going to start by saying most, if not all, South African universities have been a source of service to society, and we know that we've made a contribution to global challenges. So our scientists are continuing with this kind of service through the COVID-19 pandemic. It does appear, though, as for my university, while addressing and responding to the current challenges, the eye is now on looking at the future and how we will best recover and contribute in the future. As we all agree that there are no known best practices for this, and there's not really much precedence to follow, but we can at least identify the issues and prepare for many initiatives that we can take and decisions that we will have to make in the coming years, in the months and years. Of course, considering the missions of the university, the traditional research, teaching, and engagement, these have been challenged in many ways. If I can start with research and engagement collectively. One thing I must emphasize is that societies, including communities, are much more connected today at all levels. So during this COVID-19 crisis, we've seen a remarkable collaboration amongst partners, amongst universities, within the universities, and across many boundaries. And it reminds me of the Ebola crisis in West Africa, 2014 to 2016, where you've seen academic organizations, philanthropies, private sector working together to develop the understanding. It's similar to what is happening now, the efforts made to develop COVID-19 approaches on how to solve it. We know about the World Health Organization that launched the Solidarity Trial, involving many countries, I think actually over 30 countries. Within our own university chair at local level, there have been a number of initiatives. Of course, Nelson Mandela University as an engaged university, and which has been established towards the resolve of social justice, we developed a fund called the Convergence Fund of the university, which is to provide direct assistance to the needy and the most vulnerable people in our immediate communities. You will agree with me that the pandemic is not just disrupting academic life. It's not just a health issue. It has got huge impact on people's livelihoods. So as a university, the response to this has been the establishment of this fund, which aims at helping poor communities, and we partner with government agencies and NGOs that are suffering a lot of hardships. But also given the socio-economic challenges in our region, in the Eastern Cape region of South Africa, we know from our side as South Africans how this region has been impacted by poverty and high levels of inequality. So the response is targeted at addressing some of these challenges. But also within the university, Dr. Parker, we've got COVID-19 coordinating task teams at different levels that are looking at various initiatives. For example, looking at mental health issues for both staff and students. We also have other initiatives that are helping government in developing or in responding to the pandemic. But we also know that science has got its ability to build bridges through diplomacy, and I'm sure we'll talk about that in our discussions. This is becoming more and more important, and we require all scientific organizations to recognize the importance of contributing to society and co-creating the knowledge with society. So this requires building relationships and creating platforms for collaboration. I'm encouraged by developments, particularly in the continent, in building these bridges. I can quote in the continent, in Africa, in our continent, the establishment of the African Scientists Database, for example. That is an initiative with the National Research Foundation, the Department of Science and Innovation, ASAF, Academy of Science of South Africa, International Science Council, which is aiming to provide relevant information on African experts in the natural and social sciences, humanities, engineering, and mathematics. Why is it important at this stage? Is because of these bridges that are needed to connect people and also to collaborate to come up with bigger approaches to addressing the challenges. But also we see a shift in the manner in which funding is allocated for research. An example within our own system, the COVID-19 Rapid Grant Fund of the National Research Foundation, in partnership with a lot of partners. I can mention the Science Granting Council Initiative, IDRC, the CEDA, the UK partners, and the FRQ. And these are the partners that have come together to develop to develop a program that was targeted directly at addressing COVID-19 challenges. Of course, at our own university, we've got educational programs that are aimed at public understanding and communication initiatives, which I think is very important because we need to translate all of these approaches to be able to benefit the communities where we are. And the pandemic has not stopped giving challenges that are related even to interpretation of the flow of information. We know about the accusations about the availability and accuracy of Chinese data and the origin and the impact of the COVID, of the SARS virus itself that causes the disease. But there's also concerns about veracity of data, of the US data, the United States data. We've seen a number of scientific journals retracting suspicious results regarding the treatment of the COVID-19. The choice of drugs has been politicized. All this is playing out at the global stage, but also locally within our own communities. Particularly, I can mention and quote here within the Eastern Cape region, we've seen a number of models being used to interpret the data that's coming out, but the different models and how this data is interpreted differently, which brings in the need for communication and public understanding. We as a university, in partnership with government, we've contributed in developing some apps for use at hospitals. We've got various work streams that are working with government, and considerable progress has been made in the rollout of these solutions. The Power app for stock and facility management at hospitals. We now at the final stage is actually the launch of the field hospital has been completed, and the university is part of these solutions trying to assist government. Coming back to the issues within the university in terms of teaching and learning, we've developed pathways for students. Linda mentioned the challenges that we have in terms of our socioeconomic gaps and inequality within our system, which brings in the problem of students who are not able to access learning using online tools. So we've developed pathways, what we call pathways for learning, pathway 1 and pathway 2, and there are various sub pathways within each of these two, and students are able to choose whatever is appropriate at the time. And of course, now with the directive to come back to campus at a particular date, we are working on getting the campuses ready. But also, there's a need to change the models of how we operate and how we continue doing research. You will agree with me that in a lab, social distances becomes very tricky if you have to be in a lab. So we have to be innovative about how we operate within our own spheres, within the laboratories. People are impacted, people who would need to go and interview people. All of those social distancings require that people are well educated and they understand what this outbreak is bringing. Finally, the final issue I would like to touch on is the issue of international students. Without significant support and reassurance, we may no longer have international students. I think this is a problem that all universities are facing, that international students are faced, the mobility of researchers together with the mobility of international students has become a challenge. So within our own university, since the outbreak of the coronavirus, we've initiated several processes and engagements with international students. We've done a couple of online surveys to be able to speak or get some information from the students. And these conversations are ongoing in order to determine how we can best support and how the students can best access learning and opportunities. So the pathways to learning are evolving, and we're watching the space so that we can adjust where necessary. So in summary or in conclusion, I think what I would like to summarize and say is that it's become more and more important to note the importance of consortia and the importance of strategic partnerships and to share the experiences. Public health and safety has become a priority, more of a priority than it was. And local and what we call grassroots innovation is important, in how universities can partner with local communities for the co-creation of knowledge. And there's now an expanded scope for human and social dynamics. I'm happy to take questions from colleagues.
Thank you very much, Thandi. I think you've brought up some very interesting points there, and I think we will take them forward afterwards, particularly. But before we have any questions or any discussion around with your input, I'd like to invite Professor Adam Habib to join us now and to come onto the panel. Just a little bit of background. Well, Adam is an academic, researcher, activist, administrator, and well-known public intellectual. He's currently the Vice-Chancellor and Principal of the University of Witwatersrand, and he's about to leave there and will be the incoming Director of the School of Oriental and African Studies. So, you know, he's been a professor of political science. He has over 30 years of academic research and administration experience, over 5 different universities, and multiple local and international institutions, boards, and task teams. His professional involvement in institutions has always been defined by 3 distinct engagements: the contest of ideas, their translation into actionable initiatives, and the building of institutions. So welcome, Adam. We're very happy to have you here today into this conversation. And if we're thinking about WITS, particularly, and reflecting on the institution that you're at the moment, you started very early in the process towards online learning, and So and distance learning, I suppose, in a way. You know, that was not without its controversies at that particular point. Still, when we were in level 5 of the lockdown. But if you reflect on this, and again, it's a similar kind of idea. The major challenges that WITS has faced during this time, and what do you think, reflecting on those challenges, would be the long-term impact of what has been happening now on our universities? Thank you, Adam.
So, colleagues, thank you very much. Clearly, Di, you've been interacting with our marketing division with that introduction, so thank you. I do say that the other thing that Di hasn't said is that I know her for 30 years, and she's as feisty 30 years later than she was 30 years ago. So it's lovely to have an opportunity to be moderated on a panel by Di. Perhaps I should say that, look, I'm going to probably make 4 substantive points in 10 minutes. The first and the most obvious is that COVID-19 has provided us with, or confronted us with, huge challenges. But at the same time, it's created opportunities. And our attempts to address the challenges are going to live with us for a long period of time. It's going to fundamentally impact on the character of higher education, both in this country, in the continent, and across the globe. And I think that we've got to understand that. And I think we've got to, in a sense, begin to mold that impact on higher education in a way that allows us to achieve the objectives we have as people who work in the higher education system. So I think that's the first point by way of introduction that I want to make. The second was that very early on, we went, as Di said, onto emergency remote online platform. It wasn't online because, to be honest, our programs were not pedagogically constructed to be online. We have been experimenting with online education for about 5-6 years. But to be honest, about 12% of our academic teaching program was really organized for online. And within the space of 3 weeks, between the middle of March and April 20th, we shifted our entire teaching program online and have now finished an entire quarter and are in the middle of exams. Now, in that sense, we haven't done anything that's fundamentally different to what's played out in other parts of the world. Many countries have gone into emergency remote learning. Where I think South Africa is really interesting is that we've done it in an environment that's deeply unequal. And how we've had to confront moving and rapidly shifting into emergency remote learning in a deeply unequal environment is what should be of interest to the debate globally. It wasn't without controversy. On the one hand, there were many who said to us that we shouldn't go online into emergency remote learning. Politicians said we shouldn't. Members of our SRC and student organizations said no. And the argument was that effectively poor people and people who are marginalized will be disadvantaged. And our response, if you like, was we committed to social justice, but social justice does not mean a reversion to the lowest common denominator. That's not what social justice is about. What social justice is requires an awareness of inequality and then attempts to mitigate that inequality. And our argument in this regard was, okay, we recognize that about 15% of our students don't have devices. Many more don't have connectivity. And so what we did is we procured 5,000 devices and loaned it under very, very difficult conditions of lockdown. We distributed in partnership with the South African Postal Service, who I must say did a phenomenal job in delivering all of our laptops And the deal we struck with them was that they will do it, and we will publicly indicate about the partnership that they entered into. So all of this was done. We engaged the telcos and negotiated 10 gigabytes of data anytime, 20 gigabytes in the evening, to enable connectivity for our students. We enabled multimodal learning by suggesting that we'll create multiple academic calendars. So we didn't not do what the US and the UK and much of Western Europe did, but we did it in a deeply unequal context. And there were interesting challenges that we had to overcome. So that, if you like, is the first thing. What does that mean for us? Well, what it means, if you like, is a shift. I don't think we're going to be there in online learning, but I do think we're moving towards a blended learning in the future. And I think that there are opportunities. Why should we have large classes of 1,000 people if we can shift this into online learning, etc.? And so that's the first kind of big systemic consequence that I think we need to bear in mind. The second is really about global partnerships. What I think that COVID-19 has brought to the fore is that all of our challenges are global. Whether you like it or not, this is a global pandemic. Whether it's global climate change or renewable energy or inequality or social and political polarization, these are transnational challenges of our time. And what you're going to require is great science, world-class science, but local understanding to enable for these things to be addressed. And it's that coming together of world-class technology and local understanding that is required. Now that has huge implications for higher education, because the traditional model of global higher education is identify talented people in the developing world, offer them scholarships and take them to Western Europe, the United States, and train them. But what that does is it undermines human resource capacities, the return rate doesn't work out, and it accelerates the brain drain. And here's the challenge. If we do not stem the brain drain, if we do not address the human resource capacities of our world, we will never be able to address the global challenges in local contexts. And the next time we have an Ebola or one of the global pandemics, we're not going to be address it at its source. And that means it makes the world vulnerable and the global community vulnerable. And that requires a new thinking of higher education partnerships that is more institutionally grounded, joint courses, joint training, split-side scholarships, a complete reimagination of higher education. And that's what I don't think we're talking about enough. And I think we need to start talking about that globally. The final point I want to make, and I'll shut up at this point, I promise you, is that at the moment, institutions around the world are in fiscal and financial trouble. In the US, in the UK, some 50 universities are financially threatened because their entire business model was about getting large numbers of international students and charging them 3 times what they were charging domestic students. The whole system was warped. It was a warped business model to get the poorest of the world to pay the highest fees so that they can be financially sustainable. That model's out of the window. And it seems to me we need a global conversation on what are the appropriate business models to underwrite this reimagination of higher education. And it seems to me that that's a conversation we have to have as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adam. You did very well there. So thank you for that. I think as we're getting into this conversation, we're getting more challenged around some of the consequences of what has been going on. And I think I do agree with you that this will change the way that we do. Sorry, I've got an alarm clock to remind me when your time was up. So it just went there now. I think this issue of changing the way in which we do higher education, fundamentally changing some of the ways in which we think about higher education and how we teach, how we learn, how we research is going to be something that will be with us for a long time. And I'm very interested to hear how other people are thinking about these issues. I think maybe let's go on to our next panelist now and give us time for discussion later. The next panelist is Professor Jean-Marc Augier. Jean-Marc is the president of the University of La Rochelle in France, where he since 2016. And he became the president after occupying the vice president position between 2005 and 2016. He's a full professor and researcher in computer sciences. He was the head of the research lab in computer sciences at the University of La Rochelle, which gathers more than 120 members and works mainly on document analysis and content management. He's the author of more than 200 publications and communications, and he's managed several French and European projects dealing with document analysis, either with public institutions or with private companies. Professor Augier was also president of Valkunom Association, which is an association aimed at fostering relations between industry and research organizations. Welcome, Professor Augier. If you don't mind, I'm going to call you Jean-Marc, which is easier for me. But perhaps a question for you directly is, are the challenges faced by French universities any different from the issues that have been mentioned by Dr. Meyer, Dr. Mgwebe, and Professor Habib? And in what ways? And then also in terms of your own particular experience at your university, given that it's not located, you know, in regions such as the east of France and Paris, which were hit more seriously by the pandemic, how do you see those particular issues? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yes,
we can hear you.
Okay, thank you for inviting me this afternoon. I'm very pleased to be with you today. So I will try to reply to the questions that you have just raised. Maybe starting by saying that as the president of my university, I will have probably a complementary presentation compared to what the other colleagues did, because I had to manage a lot of aspects which are related to, of course, health problems, but also administrative questions, research questions, academic questions, and so on. So just to tell you that in France, the universities have been confined from the 16th of March, exactly like I heard from South Africa just before. And we had the information 3 days before by the French President of the Republic. So we had to switch to this distance learning system for research and education in 3 days, which was quite challenging. So for managing this aspect, I immediately organized two units, one which was dedicated to health crisis unit, which was dedicated to the problem of management of human resources in the organization, because I am legally responsible of the health of the staff of the university. So I had to manage everything concerning this point and organize the work that had to be done during this confinement period. And another unit, which was based on academic aspects, in which we tried to have a kind of systemic approach, combining, of course, all the aspects related to the education of our students, from the bachelor to the PhD, but also combining what we call support services in France, which are, in France, we have some services dedicated to innovative pedagogy. And these services were here in order to see how they could help the transition to this new way of educating students. We had to also to face in this academic COVID unit the problem of the inequality, the social inequality that were already mentioned by the colleagues before, with a lot of students which were not able to access to any digital device for following their classes. So we tried to find some solutions to all these questions, and we took some, I think, original initiatives. Some of them consisted in lending a lot of laptops to our students, asking to the companies surrounding La Rochelle to help us and to give us old laptops to the university that we were lending to the students by using some kind of virtualization tools that allowed us with old laptops to follow classes exactly as if the laptop was a very high-tech, top technological laptop. Of course, we also had to help the students from the social point of view because we have a lot of international students in La Rochelle, and some of them were working at the same time as they are studying. So we had to give them some money in order to survive, because they lost their job, they lost everything. They couldn't live during this period. One thing that we did, which was quite interesting, consisted in phoning each of our students registered in bachelor. We phoned each of them in order to know how they were from the academic, from the health, and from the social point of view. And we tried to make a big table in order to see what were the parameters that were important for avoiding the students to abandon their studies. This is today we have this kind of dashboard that permits us to anticipate in the future in case of another crisis like this one in the future. Concerning the research, of course, like it has already been said, we had to face the problem of continuity of research with some platforms that had to be kept on. And most of the research labs were closed except for those who had some particularities, like animals, or I don't know, any kind of particular situations that needed to have people here for feeding animals. I don't know, a lot of things that had to be done. The thing that we are studying now is the impact on the PhDs for the research, and we see that probably a lot of PhDs have to be prolongated. Probably it's different in South Africa, but in France, most of the students are paid for doing their PhD. They have a contract with the university, and we have now to find the money for prolongating the PhDs of those which have been victim of this situation. Concerning research, another aspect on which we are a bit worried now is the relation with the companies, because in France, I don't know what is the situation in your country, but we have a lot of contracts with companies. And of course, the economic crisis that is being raised in our country has a lot of an impact on research and innovation. So probably that the faculty to work with companies in the future for research will be strongly affected. Concerning the administration part, actually in La Rochelle, we already had, because I was in charge of IT before, a good e-administration system. So it means that all the staffs of the university came back home with a laptop and could continue working at home, even if they were not at the university. The problem that we've met was the fact that the schools were closed, and some women who were mommy at the same time had to keep on their children and at the same time work for the university. So this is a problem that we had to face during this period. Of course, we had the same problem dealing with the international students that have already been raised before. This point was terrible. We had to, actually each student was a particular case. Either in a company, either in a university, every case was particular, and we had to, the students had to decide by themselves, but we have the kind of responsibility of their health. So we had to inform them of all the risks that they were taking if they were staying in their country. So we tried to encourage them to come back to France. It was not easy because the border were closing at the same time between all the world and France, and it was quite difficult to make them come back to France. So I tried to give you this overview. I would like to say that now we are preparing the first semester for the next year, and as a kind of summary and the perspectives of what we have just lived now, I would say that I can observe a deep, very deep change of culture concerning the relation with the academic institution for both administrative and education staff. in France, there were some objections to go to distance learning. A lot of professors were opposite to the idea to develop distance learning. And now, after having lived this experience, we can observe that a lot of them would like to go in this direction. This is really a deep change that we observe. And the problem is to be able to manage it now, to be sure that even if we would like to foster this distance learning system, to be sure that it remains qualitative and consistent from a pedagogic point of view. This is a point that we will have to deal with in the future. This is also true for administrative staff, for which we observe a lot of staff who want now to work at home with the same environment. So we have to control that, to manage it, in order to keep the quality of the public service. And at the end, two last points. I would like to say that from a French point of view, personally, I'm a bit worried about the problem of sovereignty, because for going to distance learning system, most of us use the GAFAM, the tools provided by the GAFAM, and we know that if most of these tools are for free, it means that there is a business model behind. So there is a real problem of sovereignty that we should consider in the future. And as a last point for the perspective, I would like to say that concerning the research, probably that we will observe, and I'm starting to observe it also, the fact that our researchers now would like to go for a more interdisciplinary based approach for the research, instead of going to a monodisciplinary based approach, to kind of try to have a more systemic approach of a problem, a societal problem, and consider it from an interdisciplinary approach, which was not something classical in France. Thank you for that.
Very, very much, Prof. I think it's interesting that there are differences, obviously, but there are also a lot of similarities between your experience and the experience that we've had here. And this issue of, how it's going to change fundamentally the way we work, I think is absolutely right. All of us can see that. It's going to be an interesting time as we go forward, and try to unpack what this means in terms of quality and how we think about these issues. So I'd like to then invite our next panelist, Professor Verena, and I'm sorry, I might get your surname incorrect, but it's Bettina Talcott. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Verena is Vice President for International Relations at the Freie Universität of Berlin. Her research and contributions focus on politics in Japan and East Asia from a comparative perspective, and in particular, relations between politics and the economy, social policy, party financing, corruption, and Japan's external relations. She's the director of the Graduate School of East Asian Studies at the Freie University, and has occupied a number of positions at an international level at various universities, Harvard in New York, and the German Institute of Japanese Studies in Tokyo. More recently, she's been strongly involved in the construction of the European University Alliance in Europa, an association of 7 major European universities and establishments formed in 2019, and whose project is supported and funded by the European Commission. So lovely to have you here, Verena, and perhaps you could just tell us what major challenges you have faced with the crisis at the Freie Universität, and how you coordinated with your partners within the UNA Europa Alliance over the last months as you faced these challenges.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Diane, for having me on the panel. I'm delighted to be here. So in Germany, our semester terms, our teaching terms start a little later than the epidemic started. So our courses started in mid-April. We were scheduled to start in mid-April. The pandemic hit in Germany in mid-March, so we had about 4 weeks to prepare. That made it easier for us. So we started 1 week delayed into our summer term and could indeed offer about 90% of the courses in our course catalog. There were just courses that involved like lab practice and things like that could not start right away, but otherwise we actually are having a fully functional digital semester in our university. Quite a number of the challenges that were mentioned earlier also of course affect us at Freie Universität Berlin. We have also in Germany quite a high level of social inequality on the side of the students. There are some who come from more wealthier backgrounds who had no problem to work at home from their laptop. They had strong internet connections and could easily adjust to the digital teaching environment, whereas others were actually used to go to the university to use internet services and to connect online, and they only had cell phones with rather limited coverage. So we had to find a way around that, while at the same time keeping our campus closed. We are a little bit in the south of Berlin. Our students live all over town, and if we have all 30,000 of them come to campus, then of course we would run risk to be the next hotspot for a major outbreak in the city. So in that way, right now we started gradually from I think the end of May, early June, to come with a controlled opening of campus, to open the libraries, at least to allow people to check out books. Lab courses can start, but with very strong social distancing requirements. And we are planning for the fall to reopen the university in a way that we have as many courses as we can in person, but everything that is larger than 40 students or so still in a distance learning environment. But of course, we are very worried about freshmen who come new to the university. German universities start in the fall, and someone who has never been there needs to somehow get to campus and become a member of the university campus family. Other issues we were facing is, of course, also with regards to research. Labs were closed at our university as well, and just reopened about 2 weeks ago. We had some kind of emergency staff on the ground for labs that involved animals or machinery that needed more regular maintenance, but generally researchers were not allowed in. And that, of course, then also brings one of the major challenges for PhD students and also for early career researchers, young postdocs, who very often are on time-limited contracts. And then when their work contract runs out, but they haven't really been able to do all the research, that brings them in a very difficult situation to continue their career. So that's one big issue. The other one was already mentioned also by Jean-Marc Augier, the question of gender relations when schools are closed and everyone's supposed to homeschool their children. When there's no kindergarten, we already see in peer-reviewed journals that while the number of publications submitted or manuscripts submitted by male researchers has not really changed much, the number of submissions by female researchers has gone down quite dramatically. So we see that gender equality is an issue that will also keep us busy in the next months to come. What I want to talk more is, since you also asked for it, is our international relations at the university, and especially Una Europa, our European university network built by 8 European universities. And we just started in 2019, so we just came together as a group and had the big mission to start to create new innovative joint teaching formats across Europe and to create a European common research area. And COVID-19 on the one hand provided quite a challenge. On the other hand, however, it also helped us overcome a lot of impediments that we faced at our individual universities. Digital teaching, which was one of the big innovative tasks in the Una Europa network, is something that has become now a natural thing to all of the member universities. And we are now working on improving our cooperation by going from mobility to connectivity. So we will send students, of course, and have physical student mobility, but we also are now working on virtual mobility in a way that we have three models. One is pure online mobility, opening up courses among the universities, just what the individual lecturers and professors want to make available. We want to create formats for blended mobility that allow students to also then probably take part of their classes physically at the partner university while doing the rest of the program remotely from their home university or elsewhere. And then also, which I think is the most exciting one, to jointly design teaching units for digital joint courses. And we have a model now that also circulates around the issue of One Health. So medical and health related research also involving social and environmental factors. And so we are building a joint project here. And what we also have done, and what was quite exciting, was an initiative that originally came out from Italy, that were hit as one of the first countries in Europe very, very strongly by the virus. And our partner, the University of Bologna, they started with a project called Transform Emergency Now, where students were coming together to address questions that were posed to them by members of civil society. So how can I shop safely, or how can I ensure participation in local elections at times when there is social distancing? And then students would, in the context of design thinking, would come up with ideas to solve these problems. They had 8 days to do that, to work in small teams together with professors. And then afterwards, the outcome was presented online, also to civil society. And we had quite a number of positive feedbacks from social actors who then picked up on the ideas presented. And we expanded that among all Una Europa member universities as called the Una 10, the Transform Emergency Now project. And we had a 10-day pan-European hackathon where we came up with quite a number of solutions, potential solutions for problems facing society now. So this is something that where we think that crisis has actually helped us, provided us with an opportunity to collaborate stronger across borders, across cultures, across languages, and across disciplines, because we think that this is the only way how we can recover from the crisis and how we can also build resilience in case there is a potential next one. And so in that way, we are in Berlin, we are call ourselves an international network university. And if I may say about the future of higher education, the future of the university should be a networked university. We cannot just fall back on our own national or local containers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Verena. I think you know, this issue of collaboration, partnership, networking, and the crisis leading to these opportunities. I mean, we've all said before that these are things that are important. Using technology in teaching and learning is important, but it's a crisis that's really forced us into this to think about it more deeply. And I think that all of these things really. It's so interesting that that there's so many parallels between what's going on in your countries and in South Africa, and you know, although there are differences, I think there's so much more in common that we have. But perhaps we could go on to our last panelist. Our last panelist is Professor Marcel Tanner. Marcel is currently the president of the Swiss Academy of Sciences and head of the expert group in public health of the Swiss National COVID-19 Science Task Force. His fascination with pathogens of tropical diseases brought him to many places in Africa, such as Cameroon and Liberia and later Tanzania, where he became head of the then field laboratory of the Swiss Tropical Institute. And he's worked with and among local people, opened his eyes to the fact that a purely biological understanding of diseases and their pathogens was not enough. And so, you know, really, I think this is an important aspect of your work, Professor. But in addition to that, he was instrumental in the development of malaria vaccines for Africa. He's a full professor and dean of the Faculty of Natural Sciences at the University of Basel from 2002 to 2004. And he headed the Swiss Tropical and Public Health Institute between 1997 and 2015, where he developed the Swiss Tropical and Public Health into a world-renowned institute of global health. He's a member of many national and international committees and advisory boards in the health, in the fields of health planning in various countries, public health, and fight against the elimination of diseases of poverty and neglect. And neglected tropical diseases. So, Professor, welcome. You're coming here with a very different kind of perspective, but we understand that you don't think that it's just only biological. So we were really interested in understanding your perspective as an epidemiologist. Sorry, my tongue just tied. Involved at the highest level. And what is the most reliable information regarding perspective and expected evolution of the pandemic, which could be important for universities to consider, for them to anticipate the upcoming weeks and months and possibly years in terms of how we deal with this kind of crisis and crises similar in the future. Over to you, Professor Tanner.
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you very much, Di. Yes, I'm from the roots, actually. I was a biologist, I was an epidemiologist, and I am still public health, so I have never asked about interdisciplinarity because I had always the chance to work with all these disciplines and have worked in university levels. And now I have the privilege and pleasure to head all the academies in Switzerland. I mean, you can say that's the place where they put all retired people, you see, people who are retired but not tired yet. And so here I am, and I'm happy to share these views with you. Thank you very much for this invitation. You know, I have a little bit a different perspective because with the chances I had to work in many places in this world, besides Africa, also Asia, and in universities. And there the basic principle was never that actually one helps the other. It was always the sentence that I often made, mutual learning for change. And I have tried to bring this into the development of the partnerships, not just partnerships that we work together, but actually that we have this principle of mutual learning for change. And that's one of the basic principles that you learn by working and not only doing science, but by being involved and trying to apply your knowledge in, let's say, fighting a crisis. We had cholera epidemics when I was first in Tanzania in 1977. That's quite some time. So that was my first epidemic experience. We then went through all the malaria endemic problems and also epidemic situations. We went to SARS-1, to Ebola. And it is always this, that you have to learn together in order to change. Not somebody helps the other. That's crap. We just are together in the same boat. And I think that's point number one. Point number two is, I'm very sorry for Adam Habib. You know, he always mentions the UK and the USA model. We don't have that. None of our Swiss university is making money with students. If you really go, then everybody pays the same little amount, and so we don't have this problem coming up in a crisis situation. Because this again is a totally unjust, actually I would call it inappropriate business model. With teaching, learning, you don't make a business. And that's very simple. That's how we learn together. So, and I was being very strong on this also as president of academies to bring this into the academic world in national as well as local universities. And fortunately it has worked. It has not worked for the postgraduate courses. That's where it's a different model. But the basic university education does not follow this model of a business model. So one challenge less. And then I would like to say that we were actually well prepared because of this basis, we really had everything in place that when the lockdown came, we could really very quickly switch also the online teaching. The blended teaching was in place, particularly if you look at the Federal University in Lausanne with the MOOCs and everything. So basically one could shift this, and the change into online teaching was not too difficult. That's one good thing. And the other good thing that has helped is the task force that the Swiss government created, where they brought together politicians, the scientists, and they were actually the scientists from the universities, higher education institutions, that advised the government in this crisis. So we didn't have one chief scientist. We had our future, we had actually a group of scientists from economists to ethicists and to biomedical scientists. And that has filtered down into the university level, by which actually, and that I changed, not to discuss the details on online teaching and so on, but it has changed also the research that the students understood. And I'm very pleased to see a sort of enthusiasm that people actually not just do my project, my question, but actually naturally develop something that is relevant to solve a problem. So that's where I agree. It needed a crisis, that something that we were trying to bring in with an experience in the field. People at the desks understood that you have to work the value chain from innovation to application. And with this, actually, you understand not only your field, you understand also political context, social context. And that is, for me, when I look at it in the middle of still the period now that we reopen, a learning that has actually influenced. And I hope we can keep this dynamic, this momentum. So within the university, we didn't have the problems of electricity connectivity in Switzerland, as you can imagine. But what was underestimated, also a question of equity, is really that you had students, as actually was mentioned for Berlin, for Verena, that actually went to university libraries. They could not be at home if you are in a community of 5 students, and maybe there are some even small children around. Nobody could operate, and you were locked into this thing. These social influences actually are very much neglected, and has actually also an important planning on the semester to come when we open in September, where we have now a blended learning very clearly. And I think it is very much established as a blended learning, because for excursions, small discussion rules, you can keep the distance rules and so on, but then people meet again. And people must look into each other's eyes and not only into screens, because the world doesn't change by looking into screens. It only looks when people are really working together. And I think these are the things that we brought in very clearly into this planning of the new semester that this should come up. And I mean, the point was also that we had a quick reaction for this question that Jean-Marc mentioned on students who have their stipends, and these stipends have to be prolonged. Here, I was very pleased that the Swiss National Science Foundation, without any big bazaar, they actually opened a fund where this could be cared of. And this was followed by major foundations that give actually student stipends. And parallel to that, opening also crisis funds for COVID problems worldwide, not fixed to Switzerland. So, I mean, it's the thing, it's the lessons learned. You know, we have had many crises. We just didn't learn properly the lessons. And people went after Ebola. People circled around the world with seminars on lessons learned. But once COVID came, many people have forgotten the lessons that we should have learned at that time. And I think that's maybe humanity, but I never ever give up. So I believe that now we make it better, and particularly learn from these exchanges with different systems and cultures, where it is not the essence of how you particularly do it in Cape Town, at WITS or wherever, or in Berlin, but it is that we learn together, and this brings this mutual learning for change. With this, I close the cycle to the very beginning, and maybe this opens some discussion. So thank you very much, a pleasure, and let's take it like that. Not only having one webinar, but let's move on together, knowing that we are not living in the first and the third world, but only in one world, and only if we accept this, we can really move.
Thank you very much for that, Professor Tan. I think that's really set the platform for questions that can come from the audience, or points that can come from the audience. I think we're going to try and give it a go. There were quite a few questions as well that have been put in the chat for the panelists. And perhaps you can just look at those questions, and when we give you a chance to speak again at the end, if you could also perhaps reflect on some of those. I see one hand up at the moment. Louvois, would you come in?
Good day.
Good day and welcome.
Thank you very much. I would like to find out from the universities. My first question is in terms of the new academic year 2021. How prepared are universities for walk-in applications, or will everything be done online from here on in? That's my first question. And then my second question, I would like to pose from a policy point of view and from a funding point of view to say, will universities in the future be looking at their funding models? Professor Habib mentioned something that is done internationally in terms of hiking fees for international students. I just want to find out, will universities in South Africa specifically be looking at alternatives to funding? And then from a policy point of view, what other changes should we look forward to as students in the future? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I can't see any other hands right now. I don't know if there any others. Let's just see. I've got one hand up. I don't know your name. It's just a number. Come in, please. It's 487-608-953.
Okay, maybe it's not me. Okay. My name is Bandile Masuku. I just wanted to reflect a bit on the future. I think I've heard a lot of colleagues talking about creating complexes or networks of universities which will work together in one way or another. And I think it's something that we have tried in South Africa. I think Dr. Parker, you will agree that the idea of creating consortia, like the one where all the universities around Durban or KZN working together, even in terms of centralized of application, and also creation some aspects of specialization in terms of niche development. It's something that now, with the pandemic, means that we must accelerate that process quite fast to make sure that those aspects do happen, because we still have to now find a cheaper way of delivering higher education, and also a cheaper way of fast-tracking research and innovation. Indeed, that as a last comment, that digitalization, it's inevitable. We might not be able to avoid it completely. It's something that the brick and mortar structure of the university might be a thing of the past, and we need to embrace that. And I think some of the universities should be creating, besides the local network or local alliances, particularly between a traditional conventional university with a university of technology, might be one aspect, so that the R&D aspect becomes more pronounced in that regard. But I think also a transcontinental type of within the continent of Africa, which is something that I think we should be doing more. And I think maybe it's just a matter of a point that I've seen that we are not having a lot of, maybe we should have had one in the panel person or an academic or colleague who would be speaking from the other part of Africa, other than the southern part, so that we can create that alliance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Masuku. Very nice to have you here with us. Thank you. I think then there's just one more question and two, if we have a quick questions, and then we'll go back to the panelists. First, Ali. Are we going to have limited numbers? Ali, come in. I don't think he can connect for some reason. Doesn't seem his mic is working. There's also Angela Markey. Angela? I'm not sure. The sound doesn't seem to be working properly from the participants. I think, let me try Ali again. Ali, come in. No, I think we've got a bit of a problem with sound.
Hi.
Di, this is Marcel again. I'm very sorry to interrupt you here, but I really have now to leave at 25. I'm very sorry. I have to go now exactly to a task force meeting, and I'm very sorry that I have to say I must have 5 minutes to change the place here. But I thank you very much, and the email is available. People can write. We hope we remain connected, and maybe with the last point, I mean, the network of universities. The network of universities starts with a network of partnership on concrete projects. Big declarations on networks that you just make and you all together, and it's all very nice, usually doesn't work. And I hope that this work, that we feel our responsibility to work together, wherever you're sitting, creates more projects of inter and transdisciplinary collaboration. And it is this network of partnership that brings us together and brings this new form, not only of university education, but this new form on how we must tackle problems together. And really, I hope also that through this, we do no longer have this distinction. This is a university that is only academic and basic research, and these are more applied sciences. But this is all very natural. If you're working from innovation to application, you have to consider it all. And these networks grow by having many of these projects. And this is how we also, without using the word help, but how we together can overcome very difficult financial situation, that these partnership projects bring us together and allow that we can actually mobilize other resources, other funds to really construct these networks of mutual learning. With this, I would really like to thank you. And I'm very sorry, but I have to go to other meetings. I was very happy that you invited me to participate a bit.
So Marcel, thank you very, very much for your input. I think it's brilliant. And I think your last points are very important. And you know, when we talk about networks, we're not just talking about virtual networks. Yes, there's a lot of digital stuff that can ham on, but we have to look in each other's eyes. I think that point is something that's very, very well taken. I think we're going to need to close soon. Anyhow, goodbye. Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask the panelists each if you can have 1 minute each to just for some closing remarks and to take us forward in the conversation. I think we could start with Linda, and then we'll go through in the same order that we can just come in one after each other. Thank you. Linda?
Thank you, Dr. Parker. Thank you also for moderating such an excellent session. I think just in the closing remarks, I think that a lot has been said about collaboration, and we really need to start focusing on enabling legislative frameworks, centering our discourse in social justice, making decisions that is based in data analytics. And as Professor Habib always says, not looking for the lowest common denominator, but seeking a platform that elevates the entire system. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Linda. Can we have Thandi?
Yes, so for me, I would like to just perhaps repeat what I've just said on the chat group. There are questions and comments that are going on the chat. And I would like to reiterate that it's the time where those most innovative and flexible models of partnership, those that have that will flourish. So it becomes very important that we continue these conversations, and leadership and in research and in teaching and innovation becomes very, very crucial. A point I would like to make is about, for example, joint appointments. We need to look at all the modalities of joint appointments and how we can benefit these. This may present a very brilliant opportunity for internationalization of higher education. I don't think it's dead. I think it's taking different angles, and we need to recognize that.
Hey, thank you very much, Thandi. Adam?
I'm not going to say what others have said. I'm probably going to say that none of this is going to happen without money. And we can talk about this as much as we want, and about social justice as much as we want. If we don't figure out a way to finance this and confront the hard trade-offs that need to happen, we're going to be in serious trouble. And I don't mean, when I talk about a business model, I don't mean some privatized model. I mean that we're going to comprehensively think, what is the component that is going to be subsidy? What is the component that is going to be fee? How are we going to integrate that into the broader political economy? If we don't get to the nub of this debate, which is about financing, none of the rest is really serious.
Thank you, Adam. I think that point is taken. I did make a point, a note about finance as well, because I think it's one of those issues. Jean-Marc?
Yes. Just as a conclusion, I would like to say that for me, this crisis, of course, has been a very difficult moment, but it can be transformed as an opportunity to go for a more personalized education system and to touch more students who couldn't access to it till now because of social questions to the higher education systems. And I think this, the way we are changing the culture is a good opportunity for going in this direction for a more larger, more social, more equal access to the educational system. And I would like also to say that strongly believe, as it has been said by the colleague from Berlin, I'm the chair, I wouldn't say that, but I am the chair of a European Alliance also, the name of which is EU Connexus, and I can attest and can say that pooling digital resources is really a good strategy for developing a strong and intercultural multilingualism in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, and for your contribution there. And I think the last one then is Verena. Come in, Verena. You've got the last word here.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. This was quite an exciting panel. I'm so happy I was on it and could contribute. I would like to come back to the network university issue, because this was also something that was brought up in the chat. And I fully agree with Adam Habib that, of course, you need funding for these kind of things. Yeah, money helps. But at the same time, what Mark Tanner said is also very important. You need to have concrete projects, and you need to have concrete ideas what you want to do together, and in that way research projects are one thing, but student mobility is another issue. But what is equally important is ideas about joint strategies, strategic issues with relation to university governance, and how we can jointly address and learn from each other with regards to certain topics. Like we, for example, in Berlin, we have this University Alliance for Sustainability, where we have been working with partners around the globe to just see how we can teach about sustainability, but also how we can do research about it, and how we can manage our university in a more sustainable way. And I think this would be one of the issues that one could certainly also pick up on later in cooperation here. So I think not just the money, but also clear questions, what one wants to achieve together, and then things can run. But I think that's the only way to overcome this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Verena. We have come to the end of our time now, and you know, I don't think I'll give justice if I try to sum up all the things that have been in this conversation, but there are clearly certain themes that have come out. The issue of social justice, of the difficulties that we have with the inequality across the system, the issues around the importance of collaboration, of partnership, of networking, of coming together with ideas. But also being quite concrete about those things that we can work together on to strengthen the systems. And of course, the issue of finances, it's not the only thing, but it is important. And the sustainability of our institutions is going to be linked to all of these different aspects. But I think one of the things we can say for certain is that things have changed. COVID isn't just a little blip on the horizon there that you know, we'll tomorrow have forgotten about. It's going to fundamentally change some of the ways in which we work across the system in higher education, and it will also change the way we think about internationalization of higher education. So with that, I'm going to say thank you very much to all our partners. It's very fantastic that everybody was here. We had a good audience. I'm sorry that we weren't able to get the audience questions as easily as we had hoped, but it's been a wonderful discussion, and we hope to have more in the future. So thank you very much, everybody, for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Salut Monsef, à bientôt.
Bye-bye, Monsef. Thank you.